It is Tuesday, the 14th of May, 2024. My name is Pigeon Rose, and this is my song of the day. Probably by vast majority, I listen to more recent music than I do old music. Probably because I'm, 29. But also, I, among my friends, kind of keep up with new music a lot. I go through the Wikipedia list of albums coming out that year at the start of every month, and write down the albums I want to listen to before the end of the year. But I do still listen to old music. I do still listen to the classics. I mean, I did David Bowie last week, for example. And the band and the song I want to talk about today, and the album that the song comes from, are like up there as all-time greats. And that is the Beach Boys, specifically the Beach Boys album Pet Sounds, specifically the song God Only Knows. It's a weird thing about the Beach Boys because they started off as a surf rock band, and then, they busted out into their own thing of being more experimental because Brian Wilson had so many visions for his music that expanded beyond surf rock. So it's just funny comparing Surfin' USA and that early stuff with stuff like God Only Knows, or even like Till I Die, which is much later, is very different. It's sort of a similar progression to the Beatles in a way, who started off just kind of like very standard but good rock and roll into being more experimental. And part of that is drugs, and part of that is that it was the 60s, and also the Beach Boys and the Beatles had very much a back and forth thing going on, which I'll talk about in a bit. But Pet Sounds is regarded as one of the best albums ever made for a lot of reasons, and one of the big ones is just how innovative it was and how different it was to what was popular at the time and what the Beach Boys had made up to that point. And God Only Knows, in particular, as a song, is regarded as one of the best songs ever made, and I would be right there with you. I think God Only Knows is one of the best songs ever recorded. So, no pressure or anything on the song when you listen to it now. But it's just a really good song, musically, lyrically, vocally, top to bottom. And we're going to listen to it now and then come back and talk about it. Just such a lovely, sweet song. It creates such a bed of softness. Something I love about this song. Even though the harpsichord is kind of a sharp cling, 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 kind of a sharp sound. Just the whole bed of instrumentation and vocals, it just feels so like warm and nice. And I really love that. Now, I've got some fun facts about it here, why it was so innovative. First of all, it opens with harpsichord and French horn, which just were not things you heard much on the radio back then. And another thing you didn't hear much on the radio back then was the word God. This is something that surprised me when I was researching it. So Brian Wilson co-wrote this song with Tony Asher, and Tony Asher was trying to convince him to not call it God Only Knows. He thought it was too much because you didn't hear that on the radio. You didn't hear people talk about God on the radio in music. Putting it in the title was even more daring. And that's such an interesting thing to me, because when you think of the past, you think of, well, I mean, I do, as someone who was raised Catholic. When you think of the past, you think of people who are more strict, more conservative, and you imagine more kind of spiritual music. At least I do. And it's just interesting to me that God was such a taboo thing to sing about. But of course, the song isn't singing about God. It's just using the phrase, God only knows what I'd be without you, as nobody knows. It's an unknowable thing. So I just think that's very interesting. Also, I mentioned in the intro, there was a whole back and forth thing with the Beatles and the Beach Boys. Specifically, Paul McCartney and Brian Wilson had a lot of admiration for each other as artists and kept trying to one-up each other. So Brian Wilson saw the Beatles innovating with their music, so Pet Sounds tried so many new things, and then Paul McCartney thought Pet Sounds was so impressive that they made Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band as kind of a response. And specifically, Paul McCartney has been quoted as calling God Only Knows the best song ever written. And like I said in the intro, I'm hard-pressed to disagree. It's such a wonderful song. Now, in terms of the lyrical content, it's also a very interesting song because it is very plainly a love song. This song is just a song about devotion. It's a song about loving someone a lot. It's very simple in that regard. But it starts with the line, I may not always love you. And this is another thing that Tony Asher and Brian Wilson kind of argued about. Brian Wilson thought that the opening line was too negative for a love song, but Tony Asher said it was perfect because it was so subversive. And it's a really interesting thing. I May Not Always Love You is such a weird way to start a love song, but it's personally relatable for me because it makes me think of arguments I've had in the past. I find it hard to be dishonest in like a very specifically neurodivergent way, where there have been times where I've been reassuring a partner and they say like, promise that we'll be together forever, or like promise that you'll stay with me forever. And I'll be like, I can't promise that because I can't see the future. I'm fucking in my 20s. I don't know what it's going to be like in 40 years. I don't know what the future will hold, which is not a reassuring thing to say and not a helpful thing to say at all, but it's true. And God only knows, starting with I May Not Always Love You makes me think of that, because it's like, this is the truth of it. I may not always love you, but I'm going to reassure you about it anyway. But as long as there are stars above you, you never need to doubt it. I'll make you so sure about it. God only knows what I'd be without you. So after saying I may not always love you, he's saying, the way I currently feel, I do love you, and I will make you feel that. I will make you know it, as long as there are stars in the sky, as long as we are under God's yellow sun. That's the whole vibe of it. And then, if you should ever leave me, well, life would still go on, believe me. The world could show nothing to me, so what good would living do me? This is an interesting verse as well, because he says, if you should ever leave me, life would still go on, believe me, which makes it sound like, oh, I don't need you, I can live without you. But then he says, the world could show nothing to me, so what good would living do me? Which is saying, no, the world will go on without you, but I don't want to. The world will continue to exist. I'm not that narcissistic, but I don't see what my life... God only knows what I'd be without you, right? If I was without you, I wouldn't want to keep on living. So, also a very dark song for that lyric. And then you get the bridge, which is all ooh, ba 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 ba, it's just all very classic Beach Boys, And then it's just repetition of lyrics for the rest of the song. But it's just such a simple idea of this like sweet love song and about dedication, but it also brings in these elements of I may not always love you and what good would living do me. So it's a really interesting love song because it's simultaneously very simple and also nuanced and complex in bringing in these other ideas of uncertainty and not wanting to be alone because there's nothing else in the world for them. It's an interesting song in that regard. There's another thing I want to talk about with this song. It's used a lot in media and TV shows and movies and whatnot. Particularly, it's stuck in my head recently because I replayed BioShock Infinite. And in BioShock Infinite, a whole central part of the game is opening tears into alternate realities. And there's one character who steals music from different times and releases it with present musicians. So it's set in the early 1900s. So you've got early 1900s musicians performing songs from later, and the first real glimpse of this you get is a barbershop quartet singing God Only Knows. And it's a great version. It's really good, especially with the whole a cappella doo-wop bridge part. Works really well in a barbershop quartet. Also, there was a thing to commemorate the launch of BBC Music, which was a cover of God Only Knows with a bunch of different artists. And I really like it. People have mixed feelings about it online for various reasons, but I thoroughly enjoy it. It starts off with Pharrell singing the I May Not Always Love You, and then it goes into a bunch of other people: Emily Sandé, Elton John, Lorde, Chris Martin, Florence from Florence and the Machine, Kylie Minogue, Stevie Wonder, all sorts of people, as well as Brian Wilson himself. Starts the second part, the if you should ever leave me, and then it also goes back around to end with Brian Wilson singing the last, God only knows what I'd be without you, which obviously they're intending it to kind of be about the audience, but also with Brian Wilson being in it, it makes it feel like he's kind of saying like, thank you for listening to my music as well. God only knows what I'd be without you, all of you singing God Only Knows. So I really like it. There's a bunch of people in it who I thoroughly enjoy. Brian May's in as well, Jules Holland, fucking Dave Grohl towards the end, Sam Smith. Oh, One Direction is in it, which is wild because this is like right at the peak of their popularity. So it's all of them together. It's a bit of a time capsule right there. But yeah, no, I really like it. I'll link that in the description as well if you want to watch that, because it's great. Yeah, that's God Only Knows. Classic song, one of the best songs ever written and recorded. Not just according to Paul McCartney, but more importantly, according to me. And that's what matters. That's why you listen to this show. For my opinions, what I think is the best songs of all time. Yeah, no, I really love this song. So make sure to comment, like, favorite, subscribe, all that good stuff. I will see you tomorrow for another song.
Break it down.
Nobody knows. It's an unknowable thing. I was thinking of an unrelated thing. And then Paul McCartney thought Pet Sounds was so impressive that Sergeant Pepper's happened. Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band happened after that.